Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, here in New York City. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening if you're watching this via our stream out there on the World Wide Web, via SYS-CON TV. Lunchtime discussion panel. What are we going to be looking at? I'll let the panelists explain that. And even better, I'm going to let the chairman of this panel explain that. Mary Beth Borgwing, Standish Risk Management. Come on, take over. It's time Jeremy had some lunch. Not.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy needs a break. He's the guru that puts all this together, and we thank him. So thank you all for coming, and I hope that you'll eat lunch if you're if you've got your box lunch. If not, there'll be, I'm sure, there'll be plenty left after we're done. This is going to be a super 30-minute panel fireside chat with our stellar, esteemed women executives from CloudNow. Just so you know who CloudNow is the cloud network of women. We're sort of like the UN of the cloud. We bring together all partners, both women and men, and we network to make sure everybody's understanding what's going on in the latest and the greatest in the cloud. I'm the East Coast Director of CloudNow, and Jocelyn Gance-Graham is the West Coast Director, and she couldn't be here today, but she's everywhere, so you'll see her name when you look at CloudNow. So thank you all for coming. I'm going to quickly introduce our panel since we have very limited time. I'm going to start with Manjula Talreja. She's a 25-year IT veteran and is Vice President of Global Cloud Business Development for Cisco. She's playing a pivotal role in creating new business models and partnerships with technology vendors, service providers, and system integrators in growing the cloud market. She has a very long career in Cisco's enterprise cloud strategy, and she is a highly sought-after industry thought leader and global speaker, and she was recently just named a CloudNow Top 10 Women in Cloud in 2013, and CableFacts magazine's Most Powerful Woman in Cable 2012. So thank you for joining us. We have Sharon Kane from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Sharon is the U.S. technology sector market leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers. She has over 20 years experience with PwC, working with broad range of clients, and has been a partner at the firm since 2005. Sharon has worked with clients to address risk and control considerations associated with cloud computing and other outsourcing activities. And we also have Vivian Maese today. She's a partner at the international law firm of Dechert. She leads Dechert's financial technology, FinTech practice, and outsourcing practice. And she has over 20 years experience in technology transactions and regulation on Wall Street. And next to Vivian, we have Jill Singer. Jill Singer is Jill Tummler Singer is recently completed 27 years of federal service and is now the Chief Executive Officer of Tummler Singer Associates, a woman-owned consulting firm focused on transformation, strategy, leadership, and technology. As a federal employee, she was the CIO for the National Reconnaissance Office and the Deputy CIO for the CIA. Ms. Singer serves as the executive on the ground for the UVA McIntire School of Commerce and is the co-chair of AFCEA International Cyber Committee. She received numerous awards in the CloudNow's Lifetime Achievement Award and Information Technology Legacy Award, Top 10 Global Breakaways CIO in 2012, and Top Woman in the Cloud in 2012 as well. She is noted as the 10 most powerful women in federal technology in 2011, and she is part of the CIO Executive Council. All these women are so well esteemed and experienced that I am actually having to cut their bios short. I apologize. And we have, I haven't forgotten you guys. And we have Jennifer Mulveny, who serves as the Director of Government Affairs at Intel in Washington, D.C. She is responsible for international trade and cloud policy and serves as the primary liaison with the Senate Republicans for the company. Prior to Intel, Jennifer served as the Director of Global Trade Policy at Hewlett-Packard Company in Washington. In addition to her work at HP and at Intel, she has also handled matters relating to Africa, South Asia, and the Americas in textiles, labor, trade capacity, and the World Trade Organization affairs. She's also worked as the staff of the House and Ways Means Trade Subcommittee, handling trade matters relating to China, the Caribbean, Central America, and NAFTA, in addition to customs and the World Trade Organization issues. So welcome.
Thank you.
So I thought we would really start out with, we could talk about the risks in the cloud, which I think most of our audience is very familiar with, but if we set the tone saying that we're here to talk about the risks and the rewards in the cloud. So we're going to start with a sort of an open-ended question where we hope that all of you will sort of add some color to the question. We want to know about the business risks of working in the cloud, and what is the right cloud service provider, and how do you match what you're doing in the cloud with the right cloud service provider, and how do you create your business opportunities so that you can really accelerate your business in the cloud. So, Manjula, why don't you start us out, and then...
Sure. So as I travel around the world and working with multiple service providers as well as enterprise and SMB customers, it's becoming very apparent that when customers of cloud are looking at both the advantages of cloud as well as risks of cloud, they're not looking at risk as only compliance and security and what will happen to my data and how will I manage all of this. They're looking at risk in a much more macro way. And I would put that into 3 categories. Risk number 1 is, as this market of cloud is becoming more like cowboy country, as I call it, where there are new cloud providers that are coming into the market, me as a consumer, will this cloud provider go out of business? That's a risk for me. Number 2, am I going to get a lock-in if I give all my cloud services, whether it's infrastructure as a service or my SaaS application, to the same provider? Am I going to have a lock-in, and how will I get out of that? And then third is very prominent in terms of security, risk, and more importantly, the whole concept of sovereign clouds, where the country of Malaysia, whether it is a corporation or it is personal data, I don't want it to be sitting in Singapore, and therefore sovereign clouds are coming in. So it's being looked at from a risk point of view across multiple dimensions.
Right. So Sharon, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I might just add that as enterprise cloud becomes more widespread and commonplace, that I think that the days of kind of putting a toe in the water and testing out a specific cloud service with a provider, are kind of, we're maturing past that. And so I would say, as you think about your cloud strategy in a 3 to 5 year horizon of how you plan to migrate to the cloud, you want to be thoughtful about what the risks associated with each piece of IT is, and make sure that you're seeking out a provider that is commensurate to that risk profile. So I think the point is fair in terms of the landscaper is vast, and that you may be better served by looking at different providers for different pieces of your outsourcing options.
Right. So
I would just follow that thought, because I think that's exactly right. In cloud, what's readily apparent to me is that one size does not fit all. I work in a highly regulated industry. I specialize in securities regulation and technology. And what's clear is that most cloud providers, Amazon, Google, large providers are creating a one-size-fits-all without agreements that will adjust. So if you're in a financial services industry, or if you're in the drug industry, or anything that's highly regulated, I strongly suggest that you look for cloud providers that specialize in your industry, not just by function.
I think that I would add to this conversation that if you're a large corporation, you're probably not going to go to one single cloud provider to meet all of your needs. And it may be that your geography predicts that or demands that, or it may be just that your company has a variety of needs. And so the risk to you is finding heterogeneous cloud providers that can actually work well together. And we need to move data between different cloud providers, that it is easy for you as a company to do so, safe and secure for you as a company to do so, and sometimes just actually possible for you to do that. And with that, you need to make sure that the contracts you create with your heterogeneous cloud providers do allow you to retain full ownership of your data, so that if you want to break that contract with them or get out of that contract at the end of its period of performance, that you don't then run into risks that your data is stuck in somebody's cloud and you can't get access to it and move it somewhere else.
So I just wanted to pop right back in and just say that when you have, significant cloud contracts, multiple cloud contracts if you're a large organization, that immediately implies from a risk management at the macro level point of view, a governance program, a very strong active governance program to manage across all those cloud providers. Just wanted to make sure that point got across in case we lose it later.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. Yeah, so I would just say, obviously, I come from a little bit of a different world, living in Washington, D.C., and managing what some would call a daily risk, and that is working on spending a lot of time with the U.S. Congress. And I would say that I think the last 48 hours has certainly changed the policy debate on issues that are related to the cloud. It's certainly not a cloud discussion per se, in light of the recent NSA PRISM program that folks are reading more and more about each day. But I think as these things come up, never underestimate the power of the Congress to capitalize and work their way into thinking about new legislation. Legislation's already been introduced in the last 48 hours, 24 hours, that could in fact impact the business that we're all doing each day. So happy to talk more about that as we get more into the session.
Yeah, I think that the audience would like to hear more about that, and I'd like to tell the audience that if you have questions for our panel, since we have a short amount of time, we could probably sit. Oh, we already have a question. Yes.
What I'd like to know about is the BYOD consideration, and if that's going to be treated as a friend with benefits aspect, that they're really not wanted, but they're integrated, and how you're going to have an interface between personal freedom and corporate consciousness. I'm just curious about that because it's a risk issue.
Oh, it's a risk issue completely, and it's really complicated. A client recently asked me to put together a policy.
Can you just state, Vivian, can you just state a little bit of the question so everybody, make sure everybody heard the question?
Our question is about BYOD, bring your own device, that trend that ultimately connects to clouds where people are bringing their own iPads, iPhones, Samsung, smartphones, and as we have increasing technological capability on those mobile devices, what's the risk associated with that, both from a cloud point of view and an employment point of view? It's really a fascinating intersection of problems from a BYOD point of view. It's cloud, it's the back end of the device, it's employment law issues, it's intellectual property ownership, it's practical physical liability. I'm strongly recommending to all of my clients who are kind of in that mode to put together agreements with their employees so that they know what rights and responsibilities, kind of simple but clear rights and responsibilities between the two. It is a little difficult to maintain. You can do, you do mostly employment agreements, but you can monitor these. The risks are so, pardon the expression, cloudy that to manage risk for an organization, they're untested. We don't have, great bodies of decided law. So when it's untested, the best way to protect the company is by having a contract in place. We can talk more about it, and I can take your card and give you a sample agreement if you'd like.
I just wanted to add to that. I think they are all the legal agreements to the point that you're making. But I think as we at Cisco are looking at BYOD and the role of the network, as we talk to customers, you have to think about security, not just at one layer of the stack. You got to think about security all the way from the device, and it can't be just at the network. And as IT organizations or as enterprise you got to look at security all the way through. And as we talk to customers, that's how we are helping them, so that it's not, I'll take care of it at the device level, or I'll take care of it at the firewall level. It's literally at the application level, at the network level, at the middleware or the PaaS layer, and in the cloud world, it's at the infrastructure service, at the platform, as well as the application level.
Would you say it's a linear security issue?
Yes, all the way through. Okay. Absolutely.
Jill or Jennifer, do you have any comments on that?
I think the only thing I would add to what Manjula said is it's also at the device level.
Exactly.
BYOD is means it's a very portable device, and it may not always be in the hands of the employee. And so if you're worried about hostile threats or you're worried about economic espionage, there are technologies out there that will help confirm for your organization that the device and the individual are who you think they are and where you think they should be in order to have security, not just through the traditional stack, but all the way up to the end user mobile device.
So if we take what Jill's saying and say that, you know, the public-private partnership in cloud and in security and learning about how we work as companies and as governments in this space is very important. You know, business leaders today are focused on getting to the cloud, but they don't want to face the complex risk issues. They want it to be simple and easy. And the government wants to learn from the companies, and I think the companies want to learn from the government. So maybe we could comment on you know, what is really going on with the executive order, and maybe what you're seeing, and comment on what you see as the risks and rewards of the public-private partnership, and what we can learn from each other, and what are the discussions that are going on now in that area globally. Anyone like to take?
There are several executive orders out there. Are you talking about the recent cyber executive order?
Sorry, yes, sorry.
You know, we're still going to work through that. I think NIST, the National Institutes for Standards and Technology, has a role to play, and Homeland Security has a role to play. OMB, the Office of Management Budget, has a role to play. But the basic premise of the executive order is to promote good sharing about cybersecurity threats and events and risks between the government and industry. If you have watched, so this was the news, 24-hour news of 2 or 3 weeks ago, when the revelations were out there about advanced persistent threats to U.S. corporations that do business with the classified federal government spaces. I think that's just indicative of the economic espionage that is going on in so many ways, and the executive order is intended to promote, I believe it's voluntary information sharing at this point. Companies out there, large network companies, large provider companies see things that Cyber Command may not see or Homeland Security may not see, and we just want a way between public and private to share that information for the benefit of all, not in a punitive fashion, but really in a way that allows the United States to have a stronger security fabric in the cloud, on our networks, on our devices, and all the way around our borders as appropriate to protect American businesses.
But also, just in select industries, not all industries. The executive order goes back to the Patriot Act, which was enacted after 9/11, to define, you know, what the mission-critical industry sectors are for the United States. And I brought my little cheat sheet because I wasn't sure I'd remember them all. And so it affects cloud if you're in the following industries: telecommunications, electrical power systems, gas and oil storage and transportation, banking and finance, transportation, water supply systems, emergency services, and business, the continuity of the government, if it affects the continuity of the government. Those are going to probably be defined very broadly in the following, you know, in whatever legislation or regulation comes out as a result, but those sectors. So I think entertainment may be safe.
Well, I don't know. They're relying on a network, and so, yeah, they might not be considered critical infrastructure. But.
One interesting bit, you mentioned the Patriot Act that I was reading just this morning that I think is absolutely fascinating, is, you know, the Patriot Act, which basically allows the U.S. government to increase its surveillance, which was passed 2 weeks after 9/11. That passed the U.S. Senate by a vote of 99-1. And it passed the House by a similar margin. And the member of Congress that actually wrote that legislation and got it through very quickly just yesterday said it should be changed in light of what's come up in the last couple of weeks. That is really quite an interesting development when you think about the emotions surrounding 9/11 and how everyone wanted everything to be done, whatever it took to protect the country. And in the last few weeks, I think everything from the espionage to the phone records to the NSA, all of a sudden things are sort of pivoting. So I think the responsibility is on us to make sure it is done in a way that makes sense, because this is sort of going to be, I think, a one bite at the apple kind of opportunity for if there is going to be changes in legislation to require more transparency, turning over of the court records. It's got to be done in a way that does not in any way inhibit the growth of the cloud or the growth of innovation. So that is what I think is going to be an interesting development in the next several months.
I think Patriot Act is very interesting if you again look at it globally, and I always put on a global hat, having a global role. within the United States is to protect our borders. But if you're in the cloud industry and a Verizon or a Terramark wants to provide services to Latin America, should Mexico have some regulatory regulations coming down from the government, especially for SMBs who don't know what to do on Amazon Web Services or Terramark and Verizon Web Services, to be able to leverage that from a data center that may be sitting in the United States, because then it's open to the Patriot Act. And does the Mexican government or small businesses or large businesses open to that? And cloud in itself is a global play. And is it changing the whole perspective of what is the role of the United States with its own rules on the growth of our companies around the world to really grow our market?
So it's not just the United States. I think that what I spend a lot of time doing is helping global clients navigate competing and conflicting legal regimes. So one of the other factors coming into the cloud space is not just the Patriot Act, but it's this other issue that we need to address in conjunction, which is our privacy laws. And so coming out of left field, Europe is developing a whole new privacy regime that will really dramatically affect location strategy and cloud provider physical positioning. So it's just a very interesting clash of regulatory systems around the world. And we've been lucky that emerging markets have been quiet, but as they emerge, they're developing more robust legal systems. So we're in for a fun time.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting. I'm just noticing on the Cloud Expo that this is introducing the SDN Expo. And so software-defined networking probably came at the exact right time, because it will allow what looks like a nailed-up circuit to keep your data out of certain locations if you don't want them to be there for privacy, national reasons, or whatever the reasons are.
So we predict investment,
Here we are.
additional
Yes.
investment
Yes.
in technology.
IT will save the day.
One business model that I'm seeing around the world is how cloud providers are starting to partner or white label with local providers so that there's the right balance. And I'll give a case in point of a big customer of ours, Dimension Data, that is going in with local service providers in India, in Indonesia, in Hong Kong, where they'll keep the data in the country, but they bring the expertise globally. And I'm seeing a big disruption in new business models as a result of exactly this need in terms of what are government regulations, what are the legal issues, and how can new and different partnerships come about in terms of providing cloud services.
Right, well, thank you. So we heard about a lot of information in that short segment. So I just wanted to sort of take a step back and say, you know, there is no playbook and no handbook for doing business in the cloud for CEOs and the business folks that are using the cloud every day. But how can they maybe look at, where can they go to get to understand more about the risks? As you know, as we say, the legislation is passing but changing at the moment it passes. What recommendations do you have for business leaders today to sort of stay on top of the regulatory compliance, also, you know, new partnerships and products? You know, yesterday they said that most of the budgets are leaving the CIO and the CTO and going over to the chief marketing officer in companies, and that, you know, the cloud is still in its adolescence years, but it seems to me that it's taking hold of our businesses and we need to be able to stay in front of that. So what are some of your recommendations for that?
I think the ownership of keeping up with regulations is really with the service providers and the system integrators. I'm not expecting with a wide variety of customers to be understanding every single detail. I think this is the whole subject matter expertise that comes from providers. But I think as consumers should be very well aware of what are the risks that you want to take and have open dialogue with them. Because I think the transparency and open dialogue with your providers as well as your integrators is going to really get you into the journey to the cloud. Nobody gets into the cloud right away. It's really a journey to the cloud. And so as you're going through the journey, build partnerships where you really have trusted advisors driving that, because that's what we are seeing across the world. Especially if I look at large enterprises may have the legal departments, et cetera, to do it. But where is cloud adoption around the world happening? A lot in the small and medium business. They don't have legal advisors within their companies, and that's why that whole thing about building trusted relationships as you go through the journey of the cloud becomes very, very important.
So for your journey to the cloud, you pack a suitcase with lots of partners. And what else would you put in that suitcase, Sharon?
Yeah, I mean, I think what has been lacking within the cloud industry is a uniform, helpful standard that can be followed and adhered to by cloud providers. That's kind of recognized, has widespread recognition within the enterprise community. And there's been some good progress made over the past couple of years in that regard. One of it would be the FedRAMP standard. If you want to do cloud services for the federal government, you now need to be FedRAMP authorized, which is a comprehensive set of cloud standards. The AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, has endorsed a statement called SOC 2, Statement of Controls 2, which is intended to be a standard over cloud, and it would cover things like security and privacy, availability, and general IT controls. And so within PwC, that's where we spend our time, is working with cloud providers on how do they get these standards adhered to and accomplished within their organization so that they can promote certifications, whether it's FedRAMP or AICPA certifications, and working with cloud users and consumers on what is it you need from a cloud provider, what are the risks that you're looking to mitigate, and helping to bridge that gap. So I think as enterprise cloud becomes more widespread and the standards kind of match up better to what the consumers are looking for, I think we'll see a standard evolve that is a better fit to what consumers are looking for.
So I think that the prominence of technology, the dependence that we've created on technology in operating most businesses in the past decade is just tremendous. And I think that creates, needs to heighten the profile of technology to the board level. So I think really to manage these risks, we need more educated boards of directors. And in addition, as compliance issues, particularly for global organizations, become increasingly complicated, those issues need to be managed at the board level. It's how you manage fundamental risk. So you can't afford to be ignorant about what the risks are in your technology environment any longer.
Thank you, Vivian. Jill, would you like to comment on that?
I think it's fascinating to see the chief marketing officers take such an active role in information technology. I'm not so sure that I would fully support, as a former CIO, fully support stripping the budgets away from the CIOs. I would actually really be a proponent of more close relationships between the CIO and the CMO to ensure that we're using technology in a balanced and safe way while we're also using the technology to promote whatever the business goals and objectives are for that particular organization. And so I would support everything you all have said, and just note that it's a partnership. So in our suitcase, we need the strong partnership between the CIO and the CMO, and for them to not fight with each other over who should own the dollars, but throw that away and really come together about what are the priorities for the business and how they can work together to support the priorities for the business. And I think any organization that is beyond its little city is going to need a cloud to do that.
That's great.
Mary Beth, I think what I would put in my suitcase, that's a great analogy, by the way, is trade associations. And I think from where I sit in Washington, it's always very important when you have an issue with respect to proposed regulation or proposed legislation is to ride along with fellow travelers from other technology companies. And for all the bickering amongst technology companies on various issues, there are, I think, actually more issues than not where technology companies can get on the same page when it comes to educating legislators and regulators about the implications of what they're proposing and how it could impact the cloud policy. Trade associations are a great way for lobbyists to engage. It's great to go into a meeting with a member of Congress and have 10, 12 technology companies all at the table with the same talking points. It's especially ones that have jobs in the United States. Makes a big difference. And also for our top level executives to come to Washington and sit on boards and be with other CEOs talking to higher level members in the White House and officials, I think that makes a very big difference.
So if we're going to pack a suitcase, I don't know about you, but I never like to check my luggage. So we have to have maybe a very big suitcase with all of what's going on, but we also have to have it very almost refined and to be able to drill down quickly. So if we look at the cloud, how do we leverage the cloud in business today? I'll give you a scenario. New York has recently been hit with Superstorm Sandy, which I'm sure everyone here in this room understands. And how could the cloud help in the situation where we have business interruption, business continuity issues, and what are some of the things that you would do to protect your business if you're doing business in the cloud in that type of situation? So one of the risks of being in the cloud, but the rewards as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting whether it was 9/11 or whether it is Superstorm Sandy. I guess it's called Superstorm Sandy. If everything is sitting on your site or your disaster DR is close by, Sandy didn't care whether it was New Jersey or it was New York. But we actually, from a Cisco point of view, and as you know, all the major investment banks and Wall Street is here, were able to bring up a couple of companies very rapidly back on their feet over 48 hours because it was sitting in the cloud outside of the Northeast. And in order to do remote management, where data of the phones and all of that was sitting remotely, whether it was sitting in Raleigh, North Carolina, or whether it was sitting on the West Coast, with all the information and analytics that they had, we needed only 4 or 5 people in the buildings here and completely managed it remotely. Huge in terms of the new world of backup and recovery, huge in terms of disaster recovery, in terms of how it's changing the world for us. And I know that we haven't gone public with our case studies. We will very soon. But the big banks definitely had the advantage of having some of their assets remotely in cloud and bringing themselves back up to run the global business that they do.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Would you like to comment on that,
Yeah,
Sharon?
I mean, I would say, I think crises like Superstorm Sandy and such really highlight the flexibility and the power of technology that you can gain by leveraging the cloud, right? So I think they provide a great example of that benefit. From a risk perspective, it's interesting, we saw a flurry of activity following, any real crisis around companies stepping back and really putting more of a focus on governance and risk and saying, hey, whether we suffered an outage or suffered an incident or not, it provides a good opportunity to revisit your disaster recovery and business continuity practices. And so, as we see some of these crises emerge, there's still, companies are very responsive still to, what would happen if it was here, and do we have the appropriate disaster recovery and business continuity practices? And I think that's something that still in many organizations isn't as mature as it needs to be. And as companies look to solve some of those risks, I think the cloud will provide an economical solution.
So what I think is that the economics of the cloud, particularly in the sort of macroeconomic environment that we continue to remain stuck in some way, are very, very compelling. The hard part is that there are so many risks that really need to be addressed in some form of contractual relationship. Those underlying contracts with your cloud provider are typically not negotiable, which creates a real issue for most businesses. So, we talked about governance a little while ago, and what we really need to address and focus on going forward is really due diligence, having careful due diligence to get to your trusted partner, as you were saying earlier. It's an interesting dichotomy because the back end of cloud is driving the front end. The back end is these large data centers are turning into financial products like real estate investment trusts. When those products are diligenced, they want all standard forms, and that's what's causing the front end to be non-negotiable. This is my personal theory. But that makes your due diligence up front all the more important. It also, when the economics are as compelling, we tend to think in short term here, and so sometimes there's a steamroller effect that redounds to the detriment of the organization.
Thank you. Jill or?
No, in the interest of time, I'll say
Okay.
ditto. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, I think we, do we have any questions from the audience?
Hang on, let me give you a mic if I can.
We heard about the risk and we heard about challenges. what has the panel been doing to articulate the value of cloud computing?
I think the value of cloud computing is in the eye of the beholder, as they call it, right? I mean, it is, if you think about it, it's the consumer of cloud in terms of the value for it. As I see it from multiple customers' point of view, it really started as a cost point of view, right? Pay as you grow, I don't have to do capital investments. But the value of cloud is well beyond that. I think, I believe, having talked to a lot of customers, that's valuable. However, it's all about business agility and business continuity. And business agility in terms of, I mean, if I'm able to get, and you think about the pervasiveness of infrastructure as a service. And you know, if I look at just a Cisco IT case study, if the line of business can get compute, doesn't have to wait 6 to 8 weeks and can get it in 15 minutes, where the engineers can move faster in product development, that's truly business transformation. So I believe that as various providers are going around the world, they're creating their differentiated value proposition, because everybody doesn't want to be an AWS, everybody doesn't want to be a Google, everybody doesn't want to be a Verizon, or everybody doesn't want to be a SYS. And I think that's where it's in the eye of the beholder. There are lots of different markets where it's what value do you want? Do you want it as a cost driver and a cost takeout, moving from capital to OpEx, or is it in terms of truly business transformation? And I believe cloud is what e-commerce did in the 1990s, really transform your business as it evolves.
Anybody else like to comment? 1 minute left. Okay.
Thanks. In the cloud computing space, what kind of lobbying is currently happening in Washington?
What kind of lobbying?
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, I would say we don't talk about it as cloud lobbying, because really what we'd like to, sort of the mantra that I think, and this is where our trade associations have been helpful when we get together and sort of come up with policies on the cloud. On the cloud right now, we'd like to do no harm, right? For Congress to write a cloud bill would not be in anybody's interest. There are lots of components that make up the cloud, right? There's privacy, there's cybersecurity, there's energy efficiency, there's lots of different ingredients that go into it. But what takes so much time, quite frankly, is educating policy makers. Like we saw yesterday and the day before, I was at Congress, and there were microphones everywhere when Clapper was coming up to talk about the NSA program. And so what we really want to do is keep the emotions low when you're talking about writing policy that could affect what we all do on a daily basis. And that takes a lot of time. It takes going through the executive order. It takes going through how many cybersecurity bills have been proposed in the last just several weeks. So I would say it is across the board. And it's not just tech companies. It's any company that has inventory that moves data across borders. But it does take a lot of educating. We have a lot of very senior members of Congress, as many of you can imagine. So sometimes that actually comes into play as well. But it's a very active topic for sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? I think Jeremy will let us take a couple more questions.
One behind. We have to make this the last because we've got a general session coming up.
Okay.
Last question, sir.
Yeah, with respect to the recent NSA stuff, how do we prevent in the future from like building these monster data centers and then like the light bulb goes off in our head and says, oh, wait a minute, what about people's privacy?
Was it a when?
Can we get the,
So my question,
think about privacy first and not privacy as an afterthought?
Yeah.
Is my summation.
It's a good summary.
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
So.
And I think, yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I think that we think of privacy in the wrong way in our country right now, that I think along with the way in which we need to revisit, legislation, we need to revisit what is privacy. And for a long time we said, oh, okay, it's my identity, it's my name associated with my social security number or associated with my credit card. But technology's leapfrogged that in the past decade in an incredible way. privacy's been a discussion since the 1880s when newspapers really first began to publish gossip columns about human beings. And now we have sort of the continuing human condition, only in an electronic state. So we should be revisiting what is that zone of us that is private and protected. Right now we don't have that zone, but the technology's there and invading it. So I think that everyone should go home and write to their congresspeople, I'm serious, and begin to start the dialogue about what is privacy, what do we think is private.
I couldn't agree more. If you don't have the trust, our businesses are not going to thrive. Intel is not going to power more devices if consumers do not trust the device that they're using. And I know there's some trepidation about privacy legislation and what that could mean, but I think that the trust eroding is getting out ahead of us a little bit, and we need to find a way to work to bring that back in. So it's a good question.
You know, we've often talked over the past 5 or so years about the EULA trumping the US Constitution, EULA being the end user license agreement. And as a consumer, every time you click that box that says I agree, you just agreed to whatever privacy violation you decided that you didn't want to read about it, or that you thought it was actually convenient for the purpose of using your technology environment at that time. You know, around me, let me find the coffee shop near me, or whatever. You've agreed to that explicitly, not even tacitly. I think the challenge we have right now is some of the things that we've agreed to feel tacit. We don't remember that we agreed to those, and so we have to find the balance. But every time you click that box, you just expressly agreed.
And you had no choice because you couldn't move forward. But that's a topic for an entirely other panel, which we're happy to do at some other time.
Well, thank you very much, ladies, and you were a great panel, and thank you, audience, for coming and sharing our lunchtime with us. So we hope we packed your suitcase today with lots of good ideas, partnerships, trust, and moving in the cloud is moving at light speed, as we all know. So thank you, Jeremy.
And thank you, Mary Beth. And thank you, audience. As I say.